On a cool spring morning, April 21st, 1926, a new princess was born in London. Her name was Elizabeth Alexandra Mary. She was the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York. Her father, Prince Albert, was the second son of King George V. Her mother was the kind and gentle Duchess, formerly Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. The family called the little princess Lilibet because that is how she first pronounced her own name. No one at the time could have predicted the incredible destiny that awaited this child. She was simply a beloved new member of the royal family, born not to rule but to support the monarchy from the sidelines. Her birth was celebrated, of course, as any royal birth would be. However, the line of succession seemed clear and distant for her. Her uncle, Edward, Prince of Wales, was the heir to the throne. It was fully expected that he would one day marry and have children of his own. Those children would then be directly in line to inherit the crown. Elizabeth's father was the spare, and she was the child of the spare. Her place in the royal hierarchy was secure but not central. Her life was expected to be one of quiet privilege, perhaps a good marriage to a British aristocrat, and a lifetime of performing minor royal duties. The world into which she was born was still recovering from the Great War. The British Empire was vast, but the seeds of change were already being sown across the globe. Inside the palace walls, tradition was paramount. Elizabeth's grandfather, King George V, was a stern but devoted monarch who embodied the stability of the nation. He was immensely fond of his granddaughter, Lilibet. Their bond was a source of great joy for the aging king. He saw in her a bright and sensible spirit, a delightful child who brought light into his formal world. This early family affection provided a strong foundation for the princess. The family home at 145 Piccadilly was a place of warmth and routine rather than intense preparation for a future reign. Elizabeth's early years were filled with the simple joys of childhood. She played with her collection of horses and dogs, spent time with her governess, and enjoyed the company of her parents. The public saw glimpses of a sweet, well-behaved princess, but her life was deliberately kept private and sheltered from the intense glare of public scrutiny. This peaceful beginning was a stark contrast to the momentous and demanding future that lay in wait, a future that would be thrust upon her by events no one could have foreseen. Princess Elizabeth and her younger sister, Princess Margaret, born 4 years later, were raised in a close-knit and loving family unit. Their father famously said, "We're not a family, we're a firm," but for his two daughters, the emphasis was very much on family. The Duke and Duchess of York were devoted parents who prioritized a stable and nurturing environment for their children. They created a bubble of normalcy around the two princesses, shielding them from the pressures and complexities of court life. This was not the upbringing of a future queen, but rather that of a well-born girl destined for a life of relative obscurity within the royal circle. Their education was managed at home by their governess, Marion Crawford, affectionately known as Crawfie. The curriculum was not rigorous in the academic sense. It focused more on history, geography, and French, along with lessons in art and music. The goal was to produce a well-rounded and cultured young woman, not a constitutional scholar. Elizabeth was a methodical and diligent student. She loved order and neatness, carefully arranging her toys and books. This innate sense of discipline was a hallmark of her character, even from a young age, a quiet trait that would serve her well in the years to come. Life was structured and predictable, revolving around the London home and the Royal Lodge at Windsor for weekends. Windsor Great Park became Elizabeth's personal paradise. It was there that her lifelong passion for horses began. She learned to ride at a very young age and spent countless hours with her beloved ponies. This connection to animals and the countryside provided an escape and a sense of freedom. It grounded her in simple pleasures and gave her a private world away from the formalities of her royal status. This love for the outdoors and for her animals would remain a constant source of strength and comfort throughout her entire life. The public perception of Elizabeth was that of a charming, but not particularly significant royal child. Her grandfather, the king, adored her, and the press occasionally published sweet photographs of her with her family or her corgis, but all eyes were on her uncle David, the Prince of Wales. He was the glamorous modern heir, the future of the monarchy. Elizabeth and Margaret were seen as lovely footnotes in the royal story. This period of calm allowed Elizabeth to develop her personality away from the spotlight, fostering the qualities of patience and observation for which she would later become renowned.
Perfect.
The predictable world of Princess Elizabeth was shattered in 1936, a year of immense turmoil for the royal family. In January, her beloved grandfather, King George V, passed away. His death brought her charismatic and popular uncle to the throne as King Edward VIII. The nation looked forward to a modern and dynamic reign under the new king. However, a shadow loomed over his future. The king was deeply in love with an American woman named Wallis Simpson. She was not only a commoner, but was also in the process of divorcing her second husband. This was an impossible situation for the monarch, who was also the head of the Church of England. The crisis escalated throughout the year. The government, led by Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, made it clear that they would not accept Mrs. Simpson as queen. The established church and the political class were firm. The king could not marry a twice-divorced woman and remain on the throne. King Edward VIII was faced with an agonizing choice between his duty and his love. For months, the constitutional crisis brewed behind the scenes, a secret storm that was about to break over the nation and change the life of a 10-year-old princess forever. Elizabeth was still a child, largely unaware of the complex political and religious implications of her uncle's personal life. On December 10, 1936, King Edward VIII made his final decision. In a historic radio address that captivated the world, he announced his abdication from the throne. He explained that he found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love. With those words, he gave up his crown and his empire. The throne passed immediately to his younger brother, Prince Albert, the Duke of York. Suddenly, Elizabeth's quiet and unassuming father was King George VI. This single act of abdication completely redrew the map of Elizabeth's life. In an instant, she was no longer just a princess. She was the heir presumptive to the British throne. The story goes that when her father became king, young Margaret asked her, "Does that mean you will be queen?" Elizabeth reportedly replied, "Yes, I suppose it does." Her tranquil childhood was over. The line of succession had been irrevocably altered, and her destiny was now tied directly to the crown. The weight of a future she had never been raised to expect had just descended upon her young shoulders. With her father's accession to the throne, Princess Elizabeth's life transformed overnight. The family moved from their comfortable home at 145 Piccadilly into the vast, imposing and formal setting of Buckingham Palace. The palace was not just a home, it was the headquarters of a global empire. For a young girl accustomed to a relatively private life, the change was immense. She was now the heir presumptive, the person who would one day inherit the throne. Every aspect of her life, from her education to her public appearances, was now viewed through the lens of her future role as queen. Her title changed, and so did the public's perception of her. She was now Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth, the future monarch. The media attention intensified dramatically. She was no longer just a cute royal child, but a figure of national and international interest. Her every action was chronicled and analyzed. This sudden exposure required a new level of discipline and composure. She had to learn to live in the public eye, to always be mindful of her position and the expectations that came with it. The carefree days of her quiet childhood were firmly in the past, replaced by a new, solemn sense of purpose. Her father, King George VI, understood the importance of preparing his daughter for the immense responsibility she would one day bear. He had been thrust onto the throne with little warning and was determined that his daughter would be better equipped. He began to involve her, subtly at first, in the workings of the state. He would talk to her about his work, about the red boxes of government papers he had to review each day. He started to show her what it meant to be a constitutional monarch, a role that required deep understanding, unwavering impartiality, and an unbreakable sense of duty. This new reality also brought a sense of isolation. As the future queen, she could no longer be treated like other children. Her interactions were more formal, and her friendships were carefully managed. The spontaneous playdates and simple freedoms of her earlier years were curtailed. She was set apart, her destiny a constant, invisible barrier between her and the world. This period forged in her a remarkable self-reliance and a capacity for quiet observation. She was learning to navigate a world where her personal identity was becoming inseparable from her public duty. The informal education that had been sufficient for a minor princess was, well, no longer adequate for a future queen. So, a new, more rigorous academic program was designed specifically for Elizabeth. Her governess, Marion Crawford, continued to oversee her general studies, but now specialist tutors were brought in to instruct her on more serious subjects. The most significant of these was Henry Martin, the Vice Provost of Eton College, which, as you may know, is a prestigious boys' school. He was tasked with teaching her constitutional history, a subject absolutely critical for any monarch who would have to work with Parliament and Prime Ministers. Under Henry Martin's guidance, Elizabeth delved into the complex history of the British monarchy and its relationship with the government. She studied the laws of succession, the role of the crown, and the delicate balance of power that defined the country's political system. These were not easy subjects for a teenager, but she approached them with her characteristic diligence and focus. She was a serious and attentive student, absorbing the intricate details of her future responsibilities. This specialized education was not just about learning facts, it was about understanding the profound historical and constitutional weight of the institution she was destined to lead. Beyond formal academic lessons, her father provided a unique and invaluable education in the practical art of kingship. King George VI began to share state papers with her, allowing her to see the real-time flow of government business. He would explain the context of the documents, discussing the challenges facing the nation and the decisions he had to make. This was a remarkable apprenticeship. It gave her a first-hand look at the daily duties of a sovereign, demystifying the role and grounding it in practical reality. She learned about the importance of discretion, the need for political neutrality, and the symbolic power of the monarchy. This comprehensive preparation also included lessons in languages, particularly French, which was the international language of diplomacy. She became fluent, a skill that would prove immensely useful throughout her reign during state visits and interactions with world leaders. Her education was a holistic one designed to shape not just her mind, but her character. It instilled in her a profound respect for the institution she would inherit and a deep understanding of the sacrifices required. The lessons she learned during these formative years were, in fact, the very bedrock upon which her long and successful reign would be built. The outbreak of the Second World War in 1939 plunged Britain into its darkest hour and brought a new set of challenges and responsibilities for the royal family. Princess Elizabeth was just 13 years old when the war began. There were suggestions that the two princesses should be evacuated to the safety of Canada, but their mother, Queen Elizabeth, famously rejected the idea. "The children won't go without me," she declared. "I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave." This decision to remain in London, sharing the dangers of the Blitz with their people, was a powerful symbol of solidarity and courage. As the war progressed, Elizabeth was determined to contribute to the war effort in a meaningful way. She wanted to do more than just be a symbol of hope. She wanted to serve her country actively. When she turned 18 in 1944, she insisted on joining the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army. Known as Second Subaltern Elizabeth Windsor, she trained as a driver and a mechanic. Photographs from the time show her in uniform, learning how to change a tyre and service an engine. This was an unprecedented step for a female heir to the throne. Her service in the ATS was more than just a symbolic gesture. It connected her directly with other young women from all walks of life who were serving their country. She experienced a sense of camaraderie and teamwork that her sheltered life had not previously allowed. It demonstrated her commitment to duty and her willingness to get her hands dirty, quite literally, for the sake of the nation. The public saw their future queen not as a distant protected figure, but as one of them, contributing to the fight for freedom. This experience broadened her understanding of her people and earned her immense respect. The war years were a crucible that tested and forged Elizabeth's character. She witnessed firsthand the devastation of the Blitz, as Buckingham Palace itself was bombed on several occasions. She learned about sacrifice, resilience, and the importance of national unity in the face of adversity. Her experiences during the war deepened her sense of duty and reinforced the lessons her father had taught her about the monarch's role as a focus of stability and strength. She emerged from the conflict no longer just a princess, but a young woman who had proven her mettle under the most trying of circumstances. During the frightening early years of the war, as bombs fell on British cities, a new role emerged for Princess Elizabeth, a voice of comfort and reassurance for the nation's youth. In October 1940, at the age of just 14, she made her first ever radio broadcast. It was part of the BBC's Children's Hour programme, and her address was aimed specifically at the children of the Commonwealth, especially those who had been evacuated from their homes and separated from their families. This was her first major public duty, and the success of the broadcast would be a crucial test of her ability to connect with her future subjects. Speaking in a clear and steady voice, she expressed empathy and solidarity with her young listeners. "We are trying to do all we can to help our gallant sailors, soldiers and airmen, and we are trying too to bear our own share of the danger and sadness of war," she said. She spoke of her sister Margaret, who stood beside her, adding a personal and relatable touch to the message. The broadcast was meticulously rehearsed, and her calm delivery belied her young age. It was a message of shared experience, reminding the children that they were not alone in their fears and hardships. The broadcast was a resounding success. It reached millions of homes across Britain and the Empire, providing a moment of solace and unity during a time of great anxiety. For many, it was the first time they had heard the princess speak, and her poised and heartfelt words made a lasting impression. She demonstrated a maturity beyond her years and an innate understanding of the symbolic power of her position. The speech showed that she could be a source of national comfort, a role her parents were already fulfilling for the adult population. She was stepping into her public life with grace and purpose. This early experience in public speaking was a vital part of her training. It taught her how to use the modern medium of radio to communicate directly with the people. It was a lesson in crafting a message of hope and resilience, a skill that would become central to her reign. The Children's Hour broadcast was more than just a speech, it was a promise. It was the first time Princess Elizabeth publicly shouldered the responsibility of her station, offering her voice in service to the nation and showing the world the calm, dutiful, and compassionate monarch she was destined to become. As the war drew to a close, Princess Elizabeth transitioned from a wartime princess to a young woman preparing for her ultimate destiny. Her public duties increased in number and significance. She began to accompany her parents on official tours around the United Kingdom, meeting citizens, visiting factories, and learning more about the country she would one day rule. Each engagement was an opportunity to practice the art of public life, the handshakes, the conversations, and the unwavering smile. She observed her father closely, learning how he connected with people from all backgrounds with genuine warmth and interest. Her 21st birthday on April 21st, 1947, was a pivotal moment. The royal family was on a tour of South Africa, and it was from Cape Town that she made another historic radio broadcast to the Commonwealth. This speech was not for children, but for the entire world. It was a solemn and profound declaration of her life's purpose. She spoke with a gravity and sincerity that captivated her listeners, articulating a personal vow that would define her entire reign. This was the moment she fully and publicly accepted the weight of her future, dedicating her life to the service of her people. In her clear, resolute voice, she made a now famous promise. "I declare before you all," she said, "that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and the service of our great imperial family, to which we all belong." This was not a statement of political ambition, but a sacred oath of personal commitment. It was a pledge of lifelong duty, made freely and publicly. The speech resonated deeply across the Commonwealth, establishing her as a figure of immense moral authority and dedication even before she ascended the throne. It set the standard by which she would live for the rest of her life. This declaration was the culmination of her years of training and preparation. It synthesized the lessons of the abdication, the rigors of her education, and the profound experiences of the war. She understood that her life would not be her own. It would belong to her people. Her sense of duty, instilled in her from childhood and hardened by crisis, was now her guiding principle. This public pledge cemented her role as the heir apparent, ready and willing to embrace her destiny. It was a powerful statement of intent from a young woman who had fully come to terms with the extraordinary path laid out before her. The years following her 21st birthday were the final chapter in her long apprenticeship. The unexpected journey that began with her uncle's abdication had led her to this point, a prepared, admired, and resilient young woman ready for the throne. Her journey had been one of profound transformation, from a carefree child in a minor royal branch to the direct heir to the British crown. The series of unforeseen events, the constitutional crisis, the war, and her father's sudden kingship had not broken her. They had forged her into a figure of remarkable strength and composure. The qualities that would define her reign were all clearly visible in these formative years. Her calmness under pressure was evident from her first radio broadcast during the Blitz. Her unwavering discipline was demonstrated through her diligent studies and her service in the ATS. Above all, her profound sense of duty was the constant thread running through her life, culminating in her solemn public pledge to serve the Commonwealth. These were not traits she simply adopted for a role. They were integral parts of her character, shaped and refined by the extraordinary circumstances of her youth. Her father's declining health in the early 1950s meant that she had to take on even more royal responsibilities. She and her husband, Prince Philip, whom she married in 1947, began to undertake major overseas tours on his behalf. These tours were a final test of her readiness. She was no longer just representing the king, she was, in effect, acting as his substitute. She carried out her duties with flawless professionalism and grace, earning the respect of world leaders and the affection of the public wherever she went. She was already performing the role of a monarch in all but name. When King George VI passed away in February 1952, Princess Elizabeth was in Kenya on a royal tour. She had become queen in an instant, far from home, but she was not unprepared. The unexpected journey of her early life had been the most thorough and demanding preparation imaginable. The quiet princess who was never meant to rule had been shaped by crisis, educated by a king, and tested by war. She returned to Britain not as a grieving daughter overwhelmed by her new role, but as Queen Elizabeth II, a monarch fully equipped and ready to fulfill the promise she had made to her people, a lifetime of devoted service.